Hello, friends, and welcome back to the Jank Tank, episode number 31. My name is Timothy Zaccanino. I'll be your host today, and, well, it's just me again. Today, we're going to be recording another Development Diaries episode, which means we've already pre-recorded a lot of the conversation today. So instead, I'm here to give everyone some updates, take care of some housekeeping, and introduce everyone to the subject of today's episode. First things first, we want to apologize for not having an episode out within the last few weeks. We actually sat down with community member Danelius from the Limited Level Ups Discord server to discuss some Peasant Cube, but an audio error forced us to scrap the episode. We had a pretty great conversation with him, so we'd like to invite him back on the show at some point, but unfortunately the content we recorded is lost to time at this point. Before we get into today's episode, I want to remind everyone that the best way to support the Jank Tank podcast and Jank Diver Gaming is to join our Discord server and give us your feedback on the podcast, our cubes, and anything else Magic related. We have scheduled cube events throughout the week, in particular the mainline Jank Diver cube, which we're talking about today, which we play on Wednesday and Sunday nights. That'll be the focus of today's episode. You can find links to the Discord server wherever you're listening to this podcast. You can also check out our socials at Jank Diver Gaming on Twitter, youtube.com/Jank Diver Gaming, and you can find Teld streaming on twitch.tv/Teld Talks, Teld Talks. Okay, so on to today's episode. The first Development Diaries episode we recorded, I believe episode number 25, was meant to give listeners insight into our design process. At that time, we had recognized that we had an issue in our cube with the addition of Modern Horizons 3 cards that were warping the cube around them, and we set out to have a discussion about how to correct that. The episode was meant to invite listeners in as a sort of fly on the wall and hear a more free-form take on how Teld, Chris, and I discussed changes to our cubes. We're doing that again today, with the main topic at hand being Duskmourn. We don't have quite the same issue at hand here, but Teld compiled a list of cards we never really discussed from our first look at Duskmourn, as well as some cards we did include that have proven problematic. So it felt like a good time for another Development Diaries discussing the changes we would be making. The majority of this episode will be discussing those Duskmourn cards with some other thoughts and offshoot conversations thrown in. I'll be interjecting every now and then to add some clarity to our conversation or expand on thoughts that aren't exactly clear from the recording, kind of like what I'm doing right now. And with that, I feel like we've got all the housekeeping out of the way. So enjoy the conversation, and you'll hear from me again here in a little bit. Okay. So we don't have to rehash all the stuff about the Grave Titan stuff since we've already talked about it ourselves, but
I actually think it's important.
Okay,
we've got some feedback that we have too many like Army in a Can cards that just completely change the board state with one card.
Have other people been saying that, or has it just been me shouting off of a cliff for like 3 weeks?
I mean, Teld, I'm not gonna lie to you, man. Every time you express like an opinion off the cuff, I just assume that it is partially the result of Chat Pod 1 chatter. Not that you can't like evaluate shit, but like you are more plugged into what people are saying about the state of the cube than I am.
I think the addition of Elspeth into Overlord of the Mistmoors kind of like drove this home, where people are expressing like, oh, it's so many bodies in one card that I can't deal with things where all the removal is either, sweepers that shouldn't really be in every deck, or single target removal spells. So we were talking about cards like Valgavoth's Onslaught, Overlord of the Mistmoors, Grave Titan, so on and so forth, and like Grave Titan kind of being the hallmark of like acceptability for this sort of thing because it's a 6-mana card, whereas something like Valgavoth's Onslaught, super splashable, 5 mana, Overlord of the Mistmoors comes down on 4 and then spots you like the big creature some number of turns later. Obviously, I don't think anyone's saying Elspeth is broken, but like these cards kind of compound on each other to the point where we were discussing like, should we be cautious of adding more cards like this? Should we be cutting cards? Or do we have tools in our toolbox that can fight against this sort of thing? One thing I wanted to throw out there, good card that I know, Chris, you're not a huge fan of it because it doesn't gel too well in a lot of different red decks, but Burn Down the House, I think, is a good solution to a lot of the stuff that we're seeing here, and is a good card. It just, like, what red decks would main deck Burn Down the House? That's a question to discuss.
I mean, that's a card that it tends
Red
to
Black
be
Rock is exactly what would play it.
Yeah, I mean, I think the 5-mana make 3 1/1s on that card is super underrated. And I think in a lot of our other environments, I've played at least 2 different like guest cubes where I felt like Burn Down the House was just the best card in the cube.
Well, hits Planeswalkers too is another big plus on that card.
Yeah, I think if we were going to play a Red Sweeper, that's definitely at the top of the list. I think there's if
like
you
the
wanted a
only
Red
one.
Sweeper, there's two options, I think, and the other's the Roller Crusher ride, and I think that one's in the territory of like...
That's one we're going to discuss here in a couple minutes. But that, again, I'm not saying we must play Burn Down the House. I'm saying it's a tool that I think does address some of the stuff we're discussing here.
We can't... Yeah, okay.
I was going to say, the main crux of this episode, though, is not necessarily the Grave Titan discussion. That's just something to keep in mind for cards we're going to discuss. But we do want to address some Duskmourn stuff. A, things that turned out to be way more powerful that we included in our cube. And B, stuff that we either skipped over or didn't realize how good it was. I think Teld has a general list of cards that have come up in his estimation, and we're going to discuss a couple of those.
Is that based off of limited data on 17 lands?
Most of these cards have good 17 land data, but it's more that we've had a chance to actually play them.
Okay.
I've actually played a good bit of this set, so I feel like I've got a pretty good handle on it. But yes, all of these cards do have good data because they're good cards.
Okay, just a heads up, by the way, as we go forward, like, I definitely have pokey cat tail twitching energy right now. Like, don't take it personally. That's just the mood that I'm in.
I don't know what that means.
Like, when a cat's tail is twitching and you go to touch its belly and then it pokes you, you know.
Yeah,
well,
he's saying
I'm
he's
not
feeling
going
a
to
little
touch
feisty.
your belly.
I'm in pot shot mode right now.
Okay, cool. I won't touch your belly then.
I don't want you to. It is way larger.
I will.
Than it's supposed to be right now.
can't resist a good cat belly. Sorry.
Oh, I'm so fucking soft right now. Anyway.
So to just kind of kick off these cards are problematic in some such way thing. I think we all agreed before we kicked up this recording. Overlord of the Mistmoors is the most offensive card. That's the 4-mana make 2/2/1 flyers, and then like you just get a 6/6 later that attacks and makes multiple 2/1 flyers.
Both modes are awesome. Doesn't matter. 4-mana mode's awesome. 7-mana mode's awesome.
A 4-mana sorcery that just makes 2/2/1 flyers feels like it's not good enough, but I think that actually is just good enough without being like broken. But when you add in the extra stuff and the fact that you can cast it for 7 mana if you have 7 mana and then just attack with it right away.
Well, it's the inevitability, right? Because cards that create. I mean, I think Wolf proved to us that making 2/2/1s that can block evasive creatures is just enough of a delay on the game, that if there's like a back end piece of if there's a back end piece of finishing on that, like that's just strong. Also, I hate the art, so I have no love for this card.
Sure. I mean, if that's gonna be enough to push you over the top, then sure. I don't dislike the art on it. It's just kind of goofy horror thing. But the other big one here is Valgavoth's Onslaught. I'm of the opinion that we should probably leave that one alone for now. Because I think it's doing something slightly different than other green 5-drops. I think of it as a green 5-drop, but it does obviously scale up to 7 or scale back to 3.
That's what it is, yeah.
It has done some really, really powerful things. I think Melody was the one who manifested like Kroxa off of it, or manifested a 10/10 White of the Reliquary, and like flipped those things up on top of all the other value that
I
Valgavoth
saw
gives
that
you.
game. Yeah, I saw that game. That was nuts.
So I don't want to axe like everything that's been good from Duskmourn. So like if Teld, especially if you think Valgavoth's Onslaught is just like ridiculous, like maybe we should discuss it. But the other one is the Wanderer, the what is this one called? The Wandering Rescuer or something like that. And that one we were talking about it just a little bit before Teld hopped on the call, but I don't think Chris or I have seen it be like backbreakingly like game warping or anything, but I think with the direct comparison to Avacyn, the 5-mana flash Avacyn, I think we both just kind of like the Avacyn more, and the Wanderer, when it does work, is just feels like you got cheated. So
yeah, I don't think I think it's been less flexible somehow than the original Avacyn. I don't know, that card just played defense so well, and it played like it pivoted so well. It let you get a lot of tricksy plays going on, and like the Wanderer on paper does that, but when you actually play it, the lack of evasion and vigilance is just a big deal. It doesn't pivot nearly as well. It like really loses that, which is kind of what Avacyn was there for, right? Is this card that you flash it in, you make a big defensive play and then you turn the game around and start finishing your opponent off. And the Wanderer doesn't do that. And so I think it's actually played out much worse than Avacyn, in addition to not having the same level of protection against stuff like Wraths.
Even with all that being said, like if we were to make the assumption that they're equivalent on power level, or even if the Wanderer is better, whenever I do a test draft of the cube and I see Wanderer, I'm just like, it's not that it's not good, it's just like I'm not excited to put it in my deck. And when I see like Avacyn, if I'm drafting like flashy blue-white like aggro control, I'm like, sick, I'm getting Avacyn. And that's just like maybe an emotional thing for me, but like that, when you're designing a cube, like how you feel about cards is absolutely a factor.
Yeah, I really like this card's design, the Wandering Rescuer. I think it's a really nifty design. I think it ended up being, we were a little concerned to be too good. I think it ended up being a little underpowered. It just didn't really hit the same way. I think Avacyn is both. Like you said, I do get that emotional reaction where like sometimes you just have Avacyn and like it's like it kind of has always Avacyn's the angel of hope, and like sometimes your only hope in a game is like, all right, I'm gonna stick this Avacyn, we're gonna like get the big block blowout, and then we're gonna win this game. And I think the Wanderer just doesn't have that sort of energy. It's just like, okay, well we got a good trade, and then like we can attack maybe.
Sure. Another kind of like point, I guess this is true of most just big flash creatures, but the Wanderer is really, really good against new players who don't know it exists in the cube, and like not as good against people who are savvy that your opponent could have it in their hand. Like
when your opponent taps out and retains priority.
Yeah, and they get a priority on Arena while they're tapped out with 5 untapped white creatures. Like a savvy player is going to be able to sniff that out, whereas a new player might just jam into it and lose their creature or whatever. Which isn't a big deal.
I do think there's also a bit of diminishing returns. So this is not really fair because Avacyn's a 5-mana creature with no option for a discount, but there is a bit of diminishing returns on how many Convoke cards you want with Knight Errant of Eos and in the cube already.
That card's been good, right? Like that's felt like a decent card.
Yeah, it doesn't get played every time, but when people resolve it, it seems to be good. It's usually like a 3-mana 4/4 that draws 2 cards or something like that.
I think it's been solid. I don't think it's good enough to make Resolute Reinforcements a good card, but I do think the shell itself is just like kind of fine.
Resolute Reinforcements is fine. Y'all get out of here.
I think I think it's a good card. It's just like one of those cards
it's just
that like always feels
it's so
like card
dorky.
25 and people cut it.
Yeah. And that's right. It's like 23rd card, and sometimes you don't even take it, but okay, so I mean, it sounds like, just to kind of move things along, we could easily just do Wanderer back for Avacyn. We can cut Overlord and Mistborns. I don't know that we need to talk about the cards that are coming in place of these today so much as talk about what we are interested in removing / adding, unless we have immediate like ideas for cards that would take their place. But
I don't know. I feel like if we're gonna have a design discussion, maybe we should make decisions about what we're gonna replace. But if you guys don't feel that way, I'm not gonna push.
I mean, I think if we know immediately what's going to replace it or what kind of slot we're trying to use, then sure, we could discuss it. But like when it comes down to, we're interested
we do have the option to just do like 2 immediate reversals, right? We just reverse to Avacyn.
Yeah.
And
what did
Starnheim.
we? Starnheim, sure. Yeah, and Starnheim, which is interesting because Starnheim like kind of plays out the same way as Overlord, but it's just the 4-mana option's just so much better.
Yeah, Starnheim doesn't spot you the survive. Like Starnheim is the type of card that an aggro deck can pressure you hard enough that you feel like you need to fire off the Starnheim before it's like you can't win this game type card, if that makes sense.
It also isn't a good top deck. You can't top deck it into 10 or 11 power, right? You have to like you have to foretell it, and then you have to get to your next turn. Because if you top deck the Starnheim, you just get a 4/4.
Yeah, Starnheim's one of those cards that's kind of interesting too, because I feel like it's one of those cards where I feel like people feel like obligated to foretell it without realizing that like occasionally in certain draws, just playing a 4-mana Sarah Angel is just like what you should be doing. But
sure, the heuristic there should be to foretell it, though. That's why you put the card in your deck. You don't put it in there to play a 4-mana Sarah Angel.
Well, also just for the comparison's sake, like Starnheim doesn't, like if you cast Starnheim as a 4/4, you don't also get Starnheim later in the game, whereas Overlord of the Mistlor or Overlord of the Mist just gives you both of them. Like, you just get the real card later on.
Yeah, no, there's no trade-off
or not.
There is a 0% trade-off.
If we want to reverse that, I'm fine. I don't have anything in mind immediately for the swap, and Starnheim is like kind of, that card comes in and out of the cube more often than it just comes in and out all the time. It feels like.
Well, the other option is if we feel like go wide cards are becoming increasingly problematic, then we could swap out Overlord for an additional Wrath in white if we wanted to. That being said, I looked over the 3-0 decks, and I guess there's this perception that cheap Grave Titan cards are a problem, but they're not showing up in 3-0 decks. Like Grave Titan is,
Sure.
because Grave Titan's sick, but
Well, it's not so much the 3-0 list, but they are just showing. It's just more like the gameplay patterns when you watch the games play out.
that's fair.
There's a lot more games where you just like instantly lose, or you get into an unbeatable situation quite often. I think Elspeth also trophied, but I can't remember.
Elspeth has trophied. Actually, no, I don't see an Elspeth trophy yet, but I have seen it perform in game, and it is good. Oh no, it's trophied. It actually trophied like instantaneously after we added it.
Yeah, Overlord's also trophied twice, but that one's a little bit of an exception. But yeah, okay, cool. Yeah. That I thought Elspeth had already trophied. Yeah, that makes sense.
Hey folks, I'm going to go ahead and interject here to expand on a few things that came up in this initial part of our conversation. So some of this might be a repeat of things I mentioned during the MH3 development diaries, but someone might appreciate the insight, so bear with me if I'm repeating myself. First off, you'll notice that I mentioned we came prepared with a list of cards to talk about, mainly Duskmourn cards we weren't playing that we were going to discuss adding to the cube, but we haven't mentioned any of those in the first 10 minutes of talking here. Prior to this recording, we had all already discussed the possibility of cutting Overlord of the Mistmoors, and we have had brief conversations about the Grave Titan-esque cards that clog up the board, so we came to this discussion knowing that we were likely to be cutting cards on top of considering new additions. Our team approach here is to address the systemic stuff up front, identify any issues, and then mark cards for removal from the cube before we get into the weeds about what to add. It just makes a lot more sense this way, since identifying cards you want to remove from a cube frees up slots for any new additions we land on, as opposed to working in reverse, where we say, yeah, cool, let's add cards X, Y, and Z to the cube, what do we cut for them? It's also fairly important to address systemic issues up front so that you don't accidentally double down on the problematic factors while making a decision about what to add or cut. So, by saying we've got an identifiable problem with cards that make multiple bodies up front, we can stop ourselves if one of the cards we're considering feeds into that issue. You'll hear this in just a moment, actually. The first card up for consideration is the Swarm Weaver, which is 3 bodies in 1 card, and we'll already have an asterisk or a red flag or what have you in our minds when it comes up, since it falls in line with the problem we've identified. This whole problems up front approach also means we can be on the lookout for new additions that solve the issue at hand. For example, if we were to talk about a possible new addition that can take out multiple threats at once, that's going to shoot way up in our priority list, because not only is it something new to try out, but it also helps course correct the problem we identified from the start. Last thing, and we'll get back to the recording, I promise, you'll hear us talk about swaps like the Avacyn Wanderer swap a lot, though the swaps aren't always as cut and dry like that. This was a change we made very recently, so it's easy to just revert the swap we made originally and go back to playing Avacyn, but sometimes we're looking for a replacement for something that's been around for a while and doesn't have an immediate one-for-one swap. We usually have 2 methods to fill in these spots. One is what I like to call the TONC method. You've probably heard me say that on the podcast before. TONC, it's an acronym for try out the new card. Basically, this just means we should be testing out cards we haven't played before anytime we think there might be any sort of merit to playing the card. Even if we're suspicious of how it's going to perform, we don't really know until we try it out. I'm personally a big advocate of the TONC method in cube design. The other approach is digging behind us and seeing if we can uncover any hidden gems that we've left behind us at one point or another. It's easy to cut cards from a cube and then forget they exist, but something we've been working on more as we become better cube designers is looking at cards we've either passed over before or already cut in the past and reevaluating them in the context of our cube as it is today. That tends to be a lot harder to do, but it's something to keep in mind if you hear us prattling on about some older cards in the Arena catalog. Okay, enough explanation. Hope this is helpful at driving the conversation forward from this point. Let's get back to the recording. Before we move on to talking about like possible additions, I did want to like check in on other cards that we added recently to see like where we feel or what we feel about them. The first one I wanted to check on is the Verges, the lands, and see what you guys thought of those, because I've heard specifically Persian, who's known to be like a 3-4 color drafter, has like said that he hates this cycle. He thinks they're terrible, but I've also watched him one thing that's really annoying about this, if you're holding Thornspire Verge and you're open in hand, you're going to see the red-green border and assume it's a red-green land. So if you don't pay too much attention to it, you could actually end up in a situation where like it's not a red-green land because you kept that plus like Rootbound Crag or whatever non-typed dual land you have. So I've seen him get in this situation like 5 times now where he keeps hands assuming that it taps for both colors and then it doesn't and he loses. So he's very vocal about hating the Verges, but I don't know what the overall opinion about those is.
I don't see the problem, because if they were check lands, then it would just come in tapped. And I guess like we've discussed this where there are scenarios where like you don't have the land type to turn it into a dual land later, and in that particular situation, it is worse than a check land. But I don't personally have a problem with some of our dual lands just being more functional when you're 3 colors instead of 4 or 5.
I also don't have a lot of sympathy for this land is worse in my 4 and 5 color pile that I try to draft every week.
Yeah, I think there's some user error there, and I think he recognizes that as well. I haven't heard anybody else's opinion on the Verges, though. I'm of the opinion that they're quite good. I mean, they're just upgraded basics. So
my perspective is that if the only person who has like had an issue with them is the person who drafts the most ambitious, like I'm just gonna stack my deck full of good cards deck. Like I don't have. Sorry, by the way, Persian, if you're listening to this, I apologize. We're not trying to like single you out, but like you've Tashana Tidebindered me too many times, and like you're basically Naya deck for me to. I'm angry. Okay, you make me angry with your 4 color piles. So.
Okay. I've got a watch list card here. Screamin' Nemesis has looked just
insane,
unbeatable sometimes, and we saw this in Banjo's deck a couple weeks ago where he was playing it in red-green with the fight spells, where it's just insane. Like, he primal mighted somebody for, like, X is 4, and it, like, killed their opponent's creature. The thing fought back, like, it was a 5/5, so he got to nug something for 5. And then kept his 7-power Screamin' Nemesis on board. So I don't know. The card is like brutal against certain matchups where they have to deal damage to your creatures to get them off board. This is what I was talking about with when we did the MH3 thing, and I was like, well, why don't we see what the next set looks like and the power level? It's like we just keep getting. This is Magic design these days. It's things like Valgavoth's Onslaught and. This is what I'm talking about, where I'm like, how long can we hold on to the power, the perceived power level of the cube that we want without like just ignoring so many cards?
Well, it's kind of funny. The Lucky Paper guys have talked before, and actually, it's kind of interesting. Like Anthony specifically, there have been some jokes on the show about like how he's becoming like progressively more disengaged because he's just like sick of the direction that Magic design is going. And yeah, even outside of the Modern Horizon sets, it's feeling more and more like they just like every card that they print is like
must kill or die.
Table flipping.
Yeah,
table flipping.
You guys ready for to have Spider-Man and Venom be the new all-stars of the Jank Diver Cube?
And Squidward.
Jesus,
yeah, we'll talk
fucking
talk
Christ.
About that one.
Like I'm so. When you sent me that message, I was like, you've got to be kidding me.
Yeah, there's a lot to talk about. That's I feel like state of Magic in general is like a whole separate topic we should probably talk about at some point, even though it's not necessarily cube related.
I'm gonna make a quick politically motivated economic statement. Do not support companies that have VC involvement. Like, just fuck venture capital. Don't give them your money.
Okay, so back to Screaming Nemesis.
Oh, I thought you were gonna say something.
Yeah, I was like, okay.
No. I agree with everything Tim said. About it. I think it's been really, really powerful. Sometimes you can't beat it, and it's really, really good with fight spells. I'm not quite ready to cut it because I think the card's really cool.
My statement wasn't we should cut this card. It's more like I feel like Magic. Like I feel like this is what baseline Magic is becoming, is cards like this rather than the power level we want to maintain. Like I really just don't see how we maintain the power level we're at when every card we seem to add from every set seems to be like the big new showstopper. And it's not really literally every card, but like, I mean, we talked about Abhorrent Oculus. We haven't mentioned it on this recording yet, but like Abhorrent Oculus feels like it's appropriate because there's like some sort of mini game you have to play to get the card into play in the first place. But even once that card resolves, like, it's pretty incredible. So, I mean,
I also don't have a problem with Abhorrent Oculus like floating around, because when we put it in the cube, I had like 3 people message me to be like, "Why are you playing this card? It's so bad." So if it's not bad,
Sure.
I'm just like,
You mean standard all-star Abhorrent Oculus?
yeah, constructed.
well, obviously, like when you can build around this card,
I know.
but
No, I do think the card's good though, without being. I think it's like there's enough hoops to jump through, and it's bad enough in your opening hand that it's probably still fine.
yeah, it's true. Every time I have it in my opening hand, I'm like, I feel like I have to mulligan this. But
hey guys, I'm getting a call from my girlfriend real quick. In case you were wondering, my girlfriend was at the grocery store checking in on a very specific kind of bacon that I was trying to find for a chicken carbonara recipe I intended to make. Long story short, she didn't find it, just thought maybe you should know that.
it is starting to feel like we have a minor white problem. We've had some decks that include white trophy recently, but I haven't seen a deck that's like 70% white trophy in a pretty long time.
Yeah, I think that's mostly because when you have a really, really heavy white deck, it almost always ends up being aggressive. And I think white aggro is just worse than red aggro. I think that's the short of it. The removal kills bigger things, but usually what ends up happening in a lot of these aggressive decks when you're playing like an aggressive red deck is you're not so much concerned with killing a big thing. You like that your spells kill things and let you play another threat. And the white removal spells, because they cost a little more to kill those bigger things, play themselves better to slower decks where you're trying to just kill everything that matters that your opponent resolves, as opposed to just getting ahead on the board.
I have an alternative theory, and my alternative theory is that because we tend to press a lower overall curve, cards like Scorching Shot, like I think Scorching Shot in a heavy red deck is actually just better than the white removal spells because it kills almost everything and has no downside. Does that make sense? Like I feel like when we switched over to like Obliterating Bolts and things of that nature and cut like the weaker burn, like it almost feels like red's removal suite is like better than white's.
Sure, I think you're functionally saying something very similar, which is that the efficiency and power of the red spells is like sufficient enough to get the job done and allow you to play other threats, whereas the white removal spells kind of don't do that. And they have downsides.
Yeah, okay,
I
that
guess
makes
you can
sense.
also say they have downsides, right? Like Deck and Stone or Get Lost, like give your opponent something that the red burn spells don't. And when they all kill the same creatures, I get what you're saying. Like when they all kill the same creatures, they kind of do.
Then the red ones are better.
Yeah, they're just better, right?
Not to mention the fact that like red has Discharge and Bolt, which are both just so efficient.
Yeah.
One more check-in real quick. Arabella. I haven't seen anyone bite on this one yet.
I have not either, but I also haven't seen anybody really playing Boros. Let me look in deck images real quick, because I thought somebody played it.
Boros hasn't trophied in a long time.
Banjo almost did, but he did not play Arabella. He was a mostly white deck. He was he lost to you, I think, in the finals earlier this week.
He did, and he also had the misfortune of playing an aggressive deck into my Yawgmoth deck, which was not a recipe for success.
Okay, so should we just leave Arabella alone right now, or just?
I think we can let it sit for a little while if we want. I don't have an opinion about it at this point. I think the card's very powerful, very high ceiling. But is a little anemic in terms of ever getting a second attack. So you kind of need that first one to do a lot of damage, and you're just kind of using it as a burn spell that can die to Doomblade. But at the same time, if we don't have any immediate swaps,
Well, we kind of do if Tim wants to try that green-black card, like, as always, with an asymmetrical 2-color section, you can cut a Boros card for, a card of any color combination if you want to.
Sure.
Because I don't want to cut white, even though it's like a weirdo card, simply because like it's a reason to splash green in your black-white or black-red sacrifice deck. I like that a lot.
This is going to be the argument for Get Wrong too, right? Like you sacrifice things, so it works in your sacrifice deck.
It does. Actually, in my Jund Sack deck, I drafted Gitrog and did not play it. Not because it wasn't good enough, but because my curve was so incredibly low, and I also did I main deck Hazoret? I don't actually think that I main decked Hazoret.
I mean, this is a good. So before we talk like a cut or anything, I guess let's just kick off with the Swarm Weaver, because that's going to be the one card on my list that isn't on the list that Teld presented.
Sure.
This card, just for what it's worth, this is like a top 3 rare in the limited format. It turns out, like, even if you ignore the Delirium text completely, just 4 or 5 worth of stats across 3 bodies, 2 of which are evasive, is like kind of incredible. And then Delirium is not a go-to thing in our cube. Like, we don't have to warp anything to make Delirium happen, but once you have a card like Swarm Weaver, you will actually like make some concessions towards Delirium, and I think the card obviously
like
becomes
Bubble.
pretty insane once you have Mishra's Bauble. The card becomes insane once you have Delirium. It's just so much stats, and then if you consider anything like, it's in the same section as Rutstein, which can bring it back and play it. It's in the same section as White, which can sack the tokens for value. It even plays well with the Gitrog, right? Just given the bodies that it puts on board. So I think Swarm Weaver is a card I would like to play. I wouldn't even call it test card. I think it would just be good in a Golgari deck. And then, like, if it was like a Golgari for Golgari swap, I think the obvious cut would be Gitrog, but we could also just cut Arabella if no one's going to bite on that after like 3 or 4.
I think part of the issue with Arabella is it is a relatively unique aggressive card, but like red and white 2s are so stacked in terms of just like crazy. Well, actually, white is less so. Maybe that's part of white's problem, is we have some kind of weirdo cards in the white section, like reinforcements and dare I say Stoneforge Mystic.
Stoneforge Mystic is great. I don't know what you're talking about.
You guys keep clowning Stoneforge. Stoneforge is fine. Stoneforge
was
fine.
Dude, okay, Chris, my last deck I played, Stoneforge Mystic, was a 2-drop that guaranteed drew me a card and tutored either a removal spell or the best set, like one of the top 5 threats in my deck. So
all right, you had Chainsaw on your deck is what I'm hearing. And like actually
I had Assimilation Aegis.
Oh, okay. I was gonna say,
which you promptly ran out on a board with no creatures.
Off the cuff, Chainsaw is really cool.
Chainsaw has been good, yes.
Yeah. I think Stoneforge is actually, with the package we have now and the likelihood that we get more, we're getting an equipment planeswalker in the next set, so we'll see how that
so dumb.
An equipment like an equipment focused planeswalker?
No.
Or a planeswalker that isn't equipment
that you can tutor with Stoneforge
that is also a planeswalker.
That is so fucking weird. Okay.
All we know is what it is.
The type line is legendary artifact equipment planeswalker equipment or something like that. Like, it's literally all of the card types. They didn't put any text on the card. They just showed the type line, but
they literally, as we've seen with Glimmerlight at Common, they really can't help themselves but pushing equipment to become better and better. And so I think every set.
Oh, Jesus Christ! Get out of here with that.
I think we're likely to see more good equipment.
All right, he's just baiting. He's baiting me at this point. He's baiting me. If you want to get, that's how you get Stoneforge cut. I'm trying to go to bat for you, and you're out here baiting me. All right. Well, I don't think Stoneforge needs to be on the chopping block right away, but I think I would like to toss it. What do you guys think of Arabella for Swarm Weaver? A card that people.
I don't care about Arabella at all.
Okay, let's just lock that in at some point, and then I'm going to toss it over to Teld to kind of go through some of the cards he suggested here. Some of which I can back up for sure. Others that I would be curious what your thought process is on them.
Yeah, sure. So
is Swarm Weaver all one word? Like, how do I spell
the Swarm Weaver?
I'm doing this live.
Fuck it, we'll do it live.
All right. So, a couple of them, like the first 2 are just these 2 black mid-range cards that have been really good. And I think black mid-range has been a little weaker lately, so I just kind of wanted to mention these as potential options. Like black control and black aggro have been pretty good, or like aggro with black. But anyways, Unholy Annex ended up being way better than I thought it was going to be. It turns out 5 mana 6/6 demon's pretty good, and the Unholy Annex side is pretty good. I think my problem with this at a cube level is still that like you can't play multiple of them, so if your demon dies, you could end up dying to your own Unholy Annex. But card's been an absolute turbo bomb in the limited format, and it's seen constructed play. It's been really good. And then the other one, just to talk about 2 black cards at the same time, is just an Unstoppable Slasher. We cut what was the card? The 2/4 Death Toucher, Preacher of the Schism.
Preacher.
And since then, I kind of think we're at where we don't really have like a good proactive mid-range 3. Like, I think we have good sack 3s, and I think we have good yeah, I think the threes are good. I just don't think there's like a traditional mid-range rock three. And Slasher kind of does fit that role where it just is, it's great on defense, great on offense, extremely annoying to actually get rid of. It doesn't snowball crazy hard, but it kind of puts your opponent under the abyss. But also has like a little bit of counterplay to it where, if you ever put a +1 counter on it, for example, you can just kill it cleanly and it doesn't come back. So I just wanted to kind of get your thoughts on those two first.
I would say first thing for the Unholy Annex, I think 5-mana 6/6 Flyer is still very good in Limited, but has never been good in Cube. Like, look at Doom Whisperer,
Sure,
Doom Whisperer is that with upside, and that card is pretty just bad. Adding the kind of like weird Phyrexian Arena thing to it is like a nice upside on that card, but I think like you're talking about so much mana at that point, and then like you should expect your 5-mana 6/6 Demon to die like at least 50% of the time in a cube setting.
Well,
so.
if it doesn't, you win, right?
True. Then maybe you don't need the Annex side. So like I think this one doesn't quite get there in a cube setting because the baseline of the creature isn't actually something that's proven itself to be really powerful, and then the other side's clunky.
Phyrexian Arena sucks.
Sure, and this is like worse Phyrexian Arena that becomes like way better Phyrexian Arena if the demon sticks around. But to Chris's point, if the demon sticks around, like you just win in 2 turns anyway. So that one
I'm not.
I
mention that because it played way better than like I think we suspected. We thought it'd be pretty good, and it's ended up being like a just absolute bomb.
We pooped on it pretty hard.
Yeah. Unstoppable Slasher, that one, so the funny thing is this is an 11/3 death touch for 3, which is pretty egregious. The first hit, if your opponent's at 20, just puts them down to 9. I have enjoyed playing with the card because I open it a lot in Limited, and it is nice that like it's a 2-for-1 against a removal spell that doesn't exile. Oftentimes, like, they can just kill it again before it, quote-unquote, comes back the second time, but then they have to waste another removal spell or something like that. So it's a persistent little threat. It does some cool things. This would be the type of card that I would have to see, like, what the cut would be before I would consider it. Like, if there was a 3-drop.
Spawn.
Like, yeah, that's what I was going to say. If Spawn of Mayhem is, like, a flexible slot that we don't necessarily feel like we need and we wanted to try out,
I do feel pretty strong. Like, I'm not saying that I think Spawn is weak, because I don't think Spawn is weak, but Spawn is the most flexible to me, because, like, I'm not interested in cutting Skitter, Ophiomancer, or Woe Strider, because they all have jobs.
Sure, and Augur's still fairly new as well.
Sure,
Not to mention the fact that I still think it's powerful.
Augur's good, yeah.
I think you could probably just, like, if you put Slasher in your deck, like, you would play Slasher in a mid-range deck where you wouldn't play Spawn, but you could just put like Slasher in the Spawn deck, and it probably just does a very similar thing, right? Where it just like puts your opponent on a very, very dangerous clock because it just demands answers every time.
Well, so let me ask this real quick. If we're talking Slasher and we have edited heavily the red removal to be able to deal with 4 toughness creatures, is Preacher the problem that it used to be?
So Preacher is less resilient to removal, but also way snowballier in terms of value. So that's kind of I think Slasher, one of the nice things about it is everything that it does is on board and to like life totals and stuff. And so there's an element of like, it's hard to just super hard snowball value, right? Like avoiding the 3-drop, like incredible snowball that Preacher could create. I don't know which one's better, to be honest with you. I think they're both really, really good.
I mean, so just to get into the underlying context there, Chris is secretly saying if we were going to switch the 3-drop, I would prefer to play Preacher before I play Unstoppable Slasher.
No,
is
not
the
necessarily.
subtext there?
I'm legitimately asking a question. And the question is driven by the fact that, like, okay, this is a specific scenario, but let's say that I'm playing, like, Golgari or Jund, and I lead on, like, birds, and then I play Slasher on 2, and I'm on the play, and then I attack, and, like, I don't want to block with my 2-drop that doesn't trade for it. Like, going to 10 sucks.
9. You go to 9.
Or 9. Wow. Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
That sucks.
Like, it does, but... So that is true, but you don't... Like, if you then, after that point, clear the Slasher somehow, like, the Slasher opponent has no long-lasting value out of that, whereas, like, Preacher, like leaves behind a body or drew a card or whatever. And you could argue that, like, 11 points of damage off the first hit is, in fact, long-lasting value of some sort. Like, if your 3-drop dealt 11 damage, that's good.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think this is more, to me, a point of, I think that I would like to see a return of a kind of rock-centered 3-drop in black that encourages you to play a more, that like is that sort of traditional like good defensive, good offensive, flexible creature that's not, but I just don't want it to snowball the game too hard, because we had problems with that in the past.
Sure. So it sounds like we agree Spawn of Mayhem spot is like kind of a freebie if we want to play something.
It's a flex, in my opinion.
The 3-drop, I mean, between Slasher, Preacher in the conversation, I know a card that has come up a lot in the past is Graveyard Trespasser, which is doing something very similar to Lord Skitter right now, so I don't know that we want those both in the 3-drop section as far as the Graveyard hate. I mean, Tonk method, try out the new card. I could always go for Slasher here as just a card to test out. I could see it being like the type of card that someone gets chunked for 11 on turn 3 and they're like complain about it, but I don't know how often.
So much whining if that happens.
Fun fact: this is a great card to manifest in the limited format, because they just let the 2/2 through and then you flip it up and hit them for 11. It's great.
Also, if your opponent doesn't know the MVS interaction, you just win the game on the spot, because they take the first strike hit, lose half their life total, and then the rest of your creatures kill them.
I'm down. If it's been good, let's just try it. I suspect that we will not. I suspect we're not going to end up liking it, but I don't. I kind of agree. In response to concerns that we should be trying more new stuff, maybe we need to be a little bit more proactive about just like trying the new card, even if it's worse. Because like I think a lot of our discussions about certain cards have been like, yeah, this seems fine, but like it's not better than like card X. But like maybe that's less of a consideration if people are getting bored.
I like that this is the segue so that we can include Trumpeting Carnosaur as a second Whatley target in the cube.
Add the extra dino.
We will cut Inferno Titan over my dead fucking body.
Oh, there he is.
That could be arranged.
Right. Okay, I would like to I would like for the council to consider blue swords to plowshares. That is all. Unable to Scream is amazing. I did not expect that. Like, this card, I just didn't even think was going to be all that good, and it turns out it's like the best removal spell in the set, or one of them. It is literally Swords to Plowshares in most cases. Like, yeah, your opponent can block with it. Sure, if they've got counters on it, they still get to do stuff with it. But stripping card text, and also, like, I don't know, just stripping card text is so powerful, especially when so many creatures in Magic these days are reliant on their abilities. It's a good way to fight back once your opponents resolve something and still be able to hold up interaction. It kind of reads to me like a more fair Stern Scolding, where it's like the blue deck is able to finally catch up on tempo and get ahead in the game state. Mm-hmm. Maybe it doesn't make the transition, because in the limited format, obviously there's a lot of bombs that it can hit that cube is a little more flat, and then also there's eerie synergy, so you get bonuses for playing enchantments that you don't get in cube. But this card is really overperformed to the point that I just like, not even really jokingly anymore, I just treat it as blue swords to plowshares. That's what I feel about it.
This is a card that, because the aesthetics of this last set were so uninteresting to me, and I was also going through like a pretty serious depressive period psychologically, so I was just not interested in anything, that I totally missed. I have no doubts that it is as good as what you just indicated, but my question is, do we want to create a scenario where blue has access to a powerful removal spell without having to go into a second color and prioritize Doom Blades highly? Like, my question is not, is it good enough? My question is its inclusion desirable?
I mean, I don't view that as much of a problem. Like, it's not Doomblade. Like, it's not blue Doomblade. I know blue Swords to Plowshares is kind of like half jokey, half not jokey, because it just cleanly deals with something. But like, I mean, you'll find plenty of situations where a creature resolves, gets ETB value, and then like, yeah, you can lock it down and make it an O2. But
isn't that true of like, Doomblade too, though?
Well, yeah. My point being that, like, does blue having access to this suddenly like make it really good against creatures and stuff like that? Not really. Like, it's good against, I mean, like, long-term value creatures or giant creatures that are just stats. It's not.
I think specifically I like it because it answers. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, Tim.
You're fine. Talking.
But I like that specifically it answers a couple of cards that I think are really annoying to deal with in the context of the cube. So like Sarah Paragon, more specifically Aquazots is another one that I think it being an answer to that or something like this is probably less likely to come up, but Kefnet, these kind of like Rekindling Phoenix, these super resilient cards that are just like...
Rules question. So if the card dies while this is attached, then it doesn't get to do its resilient death thing, right?
No death trigger. No death trigger. So it would stop like Scarab God if your opponent sacked Scarab God or something like that.
Or the cards that Teld just mentioned. Like they don't get to do their thing either.
That said, we do have a sack deck and some, semblance of a blink deck, which tend to exploit these sorts of cards in certain ways. So it's like not a catch-all to everything. I do think Fair Stern Skolden is a very good way to put it, because we found that card to be super obnoxious, but if Stern Skolden had to let the creature through and then get rid of it, it certainly wouldn't be as much of a problem, and I think that's kind of what we're seeing here. That said, it also... You could slap this on your opponent's 7-drop and essentially nerf it for 1 mana, so... It's got, I think, high highs, low lows, and that evens out a little bit to me as far as I don't see it being a problem.
Yeah. This is one mostly because it's pretty much unique in blue. Like, we just don't get blue effects like this pushed. We don't get blue effects like this very often.
Well, is this significantly better than...
Yes. Whichever one you're about to say, yes, it's better than all of these effects.
It is the best version of this type of... Like, stripping abilities and 0 power is exactly what you need this card to do to be playable, and it's never done that before at this cost. It's always been...
Doesn't, like, legitimate business person do a similar thing, though?
It makes it a 1/1, which I think is, like... we tried that one out, found it to be good, but literally the difference between leaving them with a 1/1 and leaving them with a 0/2 is, like, I think the difference. They literally cannot pressure you with that creature. Like,
there are a lot of blue creatures with 1 toughness. That is true.
Yeah, this is actually a removal spell, and like, your opponent can put counters on it. It doesn't give it defender, so like, sure, they can attack with it if they can do that. But if they're putting counters on it, so be it, right? You'd have to deal with that with most. I think the fact that it drops down to 0 makes it a good bit better, because it does treat it like a real rule spell. We don't have to play this one, but it is. I do consider this into the category of unique effects at this point because it is pushed on all these different angles.
Let's test it. I find Repulsive Slot to be a replaceable slot. So anything we want to test, let's just try it. Let's just try it. I'm totally down to try it.
Okay, that seems like a fine swap. Yeah. All right, let's pause there for a brief second, because there's something I wanted to expand on here that isn't really going to come up in the context of this episode. It might seem a little strange to go from talking about cards like the Swarm Weaver and Unholy Annex and Unstoppable Slasher, these high rarity game-winning bombs in the Duskmourn limited format, and then transition to talking about a workhorse common removal spell like Unable to Scream. But I think we're at a point in Magic where sets just have so much meat on their bones, and you'd be doing yourself a great disservice to ignore lower rarity cards. In fact, I know cube designers who filter out commons and uncommons when they're evaluating new sets and only look to see what rares and mythics the set has to offer. And I think with the advent of play boosters and the increased power creep we keep seeing in modern Magic, you're missing out on too much if you do this. Unable to Scream is an extremely easy card to miss on in a first evaluation of a new limited set. It's a common, it's an effect that hasn't traditionally been very good in past iterations, and it's even got some nonsense bonus texts about your opponent's creatures can't flip face up or whatever. Obviously, one of the advantages of crafting a cube environment is being able to change the cards on a whim, and after having played tons of Duskmourn Limited, Teld and myself came down on Unable to Scream as an excellent removal spell that seems like it's got a shot in cube. There's also another little mini lesson in how being plugged into what's going on in the most recent limited sets can also give you insight into new tools for your cube. So basically, I wanted to interject here to give a message to fellow cube designers out there, especially those sculpting high-power, high-rarity cubes, and that is to say, don't skimp on the lower rarity stuff these days. If we ignored commons and uncommons completely, we would have missed out on cards like Llanowar Visionary, Malevolent Rumble, Eldrazi Repurposer, Honest Rutstein, Witchstalker Frenzy, and so on and so forth, all of which have been rock-solid role players in our high-level cube despite being commons and uncommons. When a new set comes out, plug into the entirety of that set, top to bottom, and check back in with it once you're a good ways into the current limited format's life cycle. You might just find some hidden gems here and there. All right, so I guess just piggybacking off the fact that we've already mentioned Burn Down the House as a card, you have Roller Crusher Ride here, which I'm interested in your thoughts on that one.
Yeah, it ended up playing out kind of how we thought it might, where a lot of times it's just like 6-mana Plague Wind.
Isn't this just like brutal though? Isn't this one just
actually,
like?
I don't actually want to test this one, but this was like come back and we
Something
had some
we didn't discuss.
Yeah, we talked about it. We're like, will this card be good? Will this card not? This card's a bomb. This card's great. It's incredible. I don't want to play it. I don't think. I just wanted to bring it up that this was one that, I like Chris, because I know you don't really play the retail sets. This is just the update to our set review where I get to tell you this card is in fact amazing.
I mean, if anybody's interested in seeing what it does in the cube, I'm not going to fight. I mean, so many of the red cards do the same thing. Like, we pretty much always have the option to cut, like, one of the red cards that does the same thing to try an interesting red card, so...
I don't think we have a red card quite like this, do we? Like, this is on 6
No,
mana
that's not what I'm saying at all. What I'm saying is we in the cube have so many red cards, whether they be burn spells or creatures.
I see.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay. I'm not necessarily even going to bat for Burn Down the House, but like this is one of those cards where it's like, what do we want to see it do? In order for this to be a card we're playing, what we want to see it do is deal 4 damage to 4 creatures on 6 mana, and that's just like unacceptable. And that's with Delirium too, which is not a given, which we've said. And it's actually quite bad if you don't get Delirium. So a lot of it's pretty bad. Like
it does 3 damage to 3 creatures if you have.
That's
6,
fine.
right?
Yeah, five mana for 3 damage, 3 creatures
but
is okay.
That's so much worse than, or it's 6 mana to deal 3, right?
Is it 6?
Is it 3x? It is 3x,
it's
right?
3x, yeah.
Which
is
3x,
so much worse than Anger of the Gods.
Sure. I'm getting the numbers mixed up there, but yeah, like this.
The cards are different. This is not a stop your aggro opponent card. This is this is more of a Gruul. I think this actually would be more of a Gruul card where you ramp into it and then you like
a grindy kind of thing.
Yeah, grindy decks. This is more of a grinder card. Yeah, of like dealing with other mid range decks. That being said, I think the fact that it's so one sided Plague Wind, I would be more interested in Burn Down the House, but I just wanted to mention that card. These are kind of cards that I think we either didn't mention or we had concerns about, and we like, this is kind of like where we can talk about them again just to see if we've changed our minds at all.
Okay, yeah. So I mean, not inclusion for us, but maybe this is something to pitch for like Timeless Cube if it's not there or something. Okay, so the Enduring Cycle. So real quick, going down the line, we don't care about the black one. That's the life gain one. We don't care about. Do we care about the other 4? Like, are they all discussion points?
I think white, green, and red are all.
Oh, we're playing the blue one, so we don't really need to discuss that one. And it's been okay. It's been a pretty good card. So the white, green, and red one, the Naya Spectrum one. So the white one, I think, is the one that the 3 of us have discussed like a little bit. That's the card advantage one when you play 2 power creatures. It's a 3 mana 2/1 lifelink, comes back, does all that glimmer stuff. This card is played out very well, like kind of a better Welcome in Vampire, though that comparison doesn't really work for us because we're not currently playing Welcome in Vampire. The green one is a kind of take it or leave it style card. It's 3 mana 3/3, lets you tap all your creatures for mana, which can do some really strong things, but could also be kind of irrelevant. So that one I'm not quite sure about. And then the red one,
ramping into this one with a dork does literal nothing.
Yeah, what it more see it as is like you play it as just a 3-drop in like your Selesnya deck, and then you tap your like 2-drop to make mana. Like it's going to.
Pretty well,
it does some really interesting things, but I think the most interesting things it does are with like super expensive spells that we don't play really already. So
I mean, I would be fine to try it, but this one doesn't specifically interest me. I think the red one is solid.
The red one is strong. It's been, I mean, Ogre Battle Driver has never been a card we've ever talked about, but Ogre Battle Driver that you can't get rid of the effect even if you kill the creature is much stronger.
That's what makes Enduring Curiosity good. It's not like a Flash 4/3 is amazing. It's that, like, and I've played with this card a lot because yada, 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 so it's going to make fun of me in Malcolm deck. Which I've actually stopped playing because eventually they adjusted it to just be in Hell Q, and I'm really tired of playing against Ragavan. But yeah, Enduring Curiosity, what it mostly is a 4-mana removal spell on defense that like makes all your creatures have Curiosity on them. So Enduring Courage, I could be sold on. We're only playing 3 red 4-drops, and and I like all of them. So, no, we're playing 4 if you count Chandra, Torture Defiance.
Phoenix, Chandra, Hazaret, and Posse Boss.
Yep. And I'm not emotionally attached to Boss, but I do like that red go wide cards have felt like they have a place in our design now. So I would be like okay with cutting Boss, but I don't think it deserves to be cut, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I'm uncertain because like the Posse Boss having flexibility, we've gotten some pushback from some of our more aggressive red drafters who really just want all the expensive red cards to be hasty mono red cards.
Janksta specifically.
Yeah,
every single one's supposed to be Hazaret.
Hell Rider is the card he just could. It blew his mind that we did not include Hell Rider in our cube.
I'm just gonna go out on a limb here, especially because I've had a couple drinks. Hell Rider sucks. That card sucks.
I agree.
That card sucks. Like, it's a card that... It
sucks or it's the best card in Magic the Gathering. It depends on where you're at in the board state.
Yeah, like, if you have, like... If you've gone really wide as red, and then you slam Hell Rider, then it, like, wins the game. Okay. Like, I'm not saying that that's bad. I'm just saying it's not interesting. Like, I've played mono red a number of times where, like, I get Wrathed or something, and then I, like, top deck Hell Rider, and it sucks so fucking bad. Like... Hell Rider as a top deck, if you're behind, is so awful.
Which, to be fair, the Enduring, if we're talking about bad top decks, Enduring Courage will be a bad top deck if you top deck it blind.
Sort of, but if you top deck Enduring Curiosity, or whatever the red one is called, and then you top deck, like, another powerful creature, then it, like, did a job. Like, even if it dies to Doom. Hell Rider is just such a binary card that I fucking hate that card. It's so bad.
I mean, let's do a Hazaret check-in here because I have heard complaining about Hazaret's existence in the cube.
Whatever.
It's
that's my response to that. Yeah, whatever.
Hazaret does have the issue of being like it either does nothing or it's the best card in your deck and it's not even close. And like there's some complaining about that, but I do think you have to be in a very aggressive red deck to even make it work, and I think that's your reward.
The specificity is so high. The specificity is so high. Like, I have no interest in cutting Hazaret. I understand where the complaining is coming from, because occasionally Hazaret's going to come down and you're like, okay, I can't beat that card, and I realize that I just complained about Hell Rider because it's polar. But it
won me money.
It won you money?
It won me real life money.
Hazaret's one of those weird cards that, like, kind of demands that you have some exile-based removal in your cube to deal with it, but like I don't think mono red has been like back for long enough that I want to cut cards that make mono red good.
Sure. There's also Rekindling Phoenix as, you know, a discussion point. I think Phoenix just always has kind of held up. It's been like waxing and waning a little bit between like, you know, the 6 to 7 range, like here and there, depending on what else is going on. It is a card we've played for about 4 years now. If we just want to like do a switch up, it's not, it does a resilient thing that a lot of other red cards do not do. And this new card doesn't really do in the same way. So it's not like a direct 1-for-1 swap, but it is the type of card that, like, if you want to play new card over card that people know exactly how it performs, like this, that's an option as well.
I think I would like to try to find room for this card. I don't like
Courage.
any of our cut options. Yeah, I just think the card's super cool. I really like Ogre Battle Driver, but the card just being bad, it kept me from ever getting, you know, just like, well, these are the kind of cards that really get your mind where you're just like, all right, there's a dream here. You know, we're going to like play this and then we're going to, you know, play
Valgloss Onslaught on 5 and hit you with 2/6/4 haste.
We're going to play like 4 creatures. Yeah, we're just going to jam with a bunch of haste creatures next turn.
We can always go up a red 4 and Teld, I know that you're not going to be happy to hear me say this, but I think that we as designers like this card like way more than our players do, which matters, and that card is, what do you... Go ahead and guess.
Hold on, wait, let me look at the list. We got this. Hold on, what is it?
Yeah, just have a guess on what I'm about to say. I guarantee you're going to find it.
Are you going to say Invasion of Tarkir?
No, I love Invasion.
You're going to say Oliphant?
No, I'm not going to say that. Invasion is so much better than our players.
We like way more than everybody else does. Hold on.
Yeah, I don't have this one as
let's just say that it is a red card that does something that none of our other red cards do. It's a sorcery. I'll help you out.
You got me here. Oh,
are you talking about highway robbery?
Correct.
Sure.
Sure. I think that card's great though. Like, card's just good.
All right, you nailed it. Okay, man.
I mean,
the problem. So I don't necessarily disagree that we can go before. The problem is, 2 months from now we're going to be like, we have too many red 4s. We have one too many red 4s. We need to cut one.
I guess. I mean, we currently have like 5 white 4s.
Speaking of which, the alchemy card has not been very popular.
No, it actually, I've drawn it a couple times and like not been excited.
Harold fired it off and missed completely.
Oh, that sucks. I feel like
so
that's
he was
not
like,
supposed to happen, but
no.
Yeah.
So that's like kind of an off-air discussion, I think, but that should probably go. But as far as red 4s, I mean, the thing about the Endure and Courage is we've also seen how good the Arena of Glory can be in certain styles of deck, which leads me to believe that just like Haste Enabler is strong.
Yeah, I mean, an alternative would be like considering Arena of Glory because people hate losing to this card. I like it, but
I like it too. I kind of like how free it is more than I like how like often.
I mean,
I
literally played it in a red-black rock deck where it was like the reason it went as far.
Yeah, we know.
We chatted about
that.
Yeah,
that's right. That's right. Aquazats with haste is pretty sick. I mean, if we don't want to go up a red 4, like it could be Boss or Phoenix. Like part of the reason I'm so attached to Phoenix is because it is like one of 4 Ixalan block cards that's like still here. We could also cut like a red burn spell, but we have enough prowessy creatures at this point that I like a high density. Lightning Strike kind of sucks. Actually, all of the 2-mana deal 3s kind of suck.
I think they're. I mean, they have their place. I don't think they suck.
They
They're
do.
certainly.
I don't hate them. They're just not the cards.
Yeah, I know what
to
you're
be.
saying. I know what you're saying.
Yeah, I agree with your sentiment. I wouldn't go so far as to say they suck, but they definitely are not as good as.
Let's table that. Like maybe throw it on the admin dock and just real quick the white one, the white enduring creature.
This card's incredible. This card's been really good.
Let's cut Stoneforge Mystic for it.
Get those filthy words out of your mouth. Stoneforge Mystic is awesome.
I think we could just cut the 4-drop alchemy card for it.
I think that's
we
fine.
could do.
Yeah, they're both like value cards that are supposed to encourage you to play like small creatures. Except we know that this card's good, and the alchemy card's been bad.
We're just can we at some point like in the future just record a discussion about Stoneforge Mystic, and then every time it comes up, instead of like actually rehashing it, we can just replay the conversation we had about Stoneforge Mystic. All right, final interjection before we close out the conversation here. We're talking pretty extensively about a card that most people aren't going to be familiar with, so I wanted to take a moment to just read off that card and explain what it does. So the card is called 3 Tree Battalion. It's an alchemy digital-only card from Bloomborough, and it's an instant for 3 and a white that says, look at the top 6 of your library, put a creature with mana value 3 or less into play, and then you make a 1/1 copy of that creature. Technically, it conjures a duplicate, but you get the point. So this is sort of like a collected company that only needs to hit 1 creature to be useful, but the second creature you get is always a 1/1 version of the main creature. This card is especially annoying to us because it could have easily been a paper card if they had just used copy text instead of conjure text, but nothing we can do about that. At any rate, I just wanted to read it real quick since we talk about it quite a bit, but never actually explain what the card is during the conversation. All right, see y'all during the wrap-up.
You know, the alternative, if we wanted to keep our hands on 3 Tree, which I agree actually hasn't been great, is like, if we cut Overlord, we don't have to cut it for another 4-drop. Like, we don't have to bring Starnheim back. I'm just throwing that out there. I'm not saying that that's, like, the right thing to do.
I think I like 3 Tree a lot conceptually. I think it's a really slick alchemy design that they could have just put in paper, to be honest. I think the thing is that I'm willing to finally put the Coco Dream to bed. Like, I'm this is like the last gasp, right? Of like, all right, surely if we only have to hit 1 decent card with Coco, we could just like have Coco be decent, right?
I think if this card was in the main set, people would play it more often. I think it's literally because it's an alchemy card that people won't touch it.
I actually think that if they had just printed white Coco, it would be better than this card. And part of the problem is when you look at your creature density in your deck, it should theoretically hit a lot of shit. But, like, if you hit Jadar with this, then you can't... Like, this card doesn't say, like, the second copy isn't legendary. And I think that's part of the problem, is that a lot of the best cube creatures, as we all well know, is legendary creatures that don't suffer from the same things that they suffer from in Constructed. And the creature being a 1/1 isn't fabulous. Like, I think if they had just printed White Cocoa, it would be better than this card.
Okay, well, we didn't get that card, so can we cut the card that we did get and put Enduring Cute Fox thing in?
Fair point, yeah. Let's do that.
Enduring Innocence, I think is what it's called.
Yeah, I think that's the one.
Okay, so you've got the little my beloved duo of Duskmourn limited cards here that I always have together.
The Duskmourn limited banger, the Manifest bangers. Yeah. So yeah, Chris, I'm just gonna talk about these two together. The first is Unnerving Grasp. It is essentially Mana War. You manifest a 2/2, and then you bounce a permanent. You can bounce any non-land permanent, though, so it's got a lot of flexibility. I was going to suggest Repulse to cut for this, or Aether Channeler. Those are the two that kind of jumped to mind. This card is awesome, though. This card's really
What is it called? I needed to read it.
Unnerving Grasp. The only way I see this coming in is if it takes the place of Aether Channeler.
And I think Aether Channeler's flexibility has really not... I don't think it's all that interesting to me anymore because we don't really support a blink deck, and this would actually be good to blink deck too, potentially, because you could flip your card to play. If you flip a good like a non-spell permanent that isn't a creature, or if you just want to save mana with your soul card.
Yeah, but you can't. That being said, Jesus Christ, like, we're cutting so many things you can blink.
Well, okay, so one note about this is that you can blink. Like, if you manifest a creature, you can blink the creature. It comes back in face up. That's not going to happen every time, but...
That's not going to happen. We have 21 blue creatures, which I guess is enough, but...
I think the big thing here that leads me to want to play this is I think the effect where you want this kind of effect, this sort of, like, bounce effect, is at its best in an aggressive prowessy deck, and this card triggers all your prowess dudes while also putting more cardboard on the table. This card is incredible, though. Like, this card is like straight up might be the best uncommon in the second best uncommon in the format. I guess Sheltered by Ghost is number one, but in terms of our context, I think it's the best uncommon in the set, if not second best. Like, the other card I'm going to talk about here, which is Under the Skin, is the other best uncommon in the set for us. And this is essentially a Eternal Witness. It just manifests a dude. So you get to dump a card into your graveyard. You can pick up the card that you dumped there with the manifest immediately. So it's always a 2-for-1 unless you whiff completely on two non-land.
Has to pick up permanent. Has to pick up a permanent.
Yeah, two non-permanents. If you hit two non-permanents, you can't do anything with this. But that's if you cast it blind with no graveyard. But card's really, really powerful. It manifests is better in green because of all the big dumb creatures you can hit. And it's good with, like, Uro and green grindy stuff, your graveyard stuff like white and things like that. So these are just cards. These manifest cards just played out super, super well in the format with almost no synergy needed.
Okay, well, let me posit something that I think is going to surprise you guys. What about Coatl?
The 3-drop flash creature.
The reason I'm throwing that out there is I know that I, like, willed this card into existence, but when Coatl snipes you on turn 3, it just feels like you lose, and then when you draw it late, it's just Flash Windrake.
Mm-hmm. I do kind of agree with that sentiment. I feel like it's almost always either just breaks your back in half or does nothing.
I mean,
I don't disagree with that.
I've heard several players express this, and, like, I like the design of this card because, again, I posited that it should exist. But on turn 3, when your opponent's like, I played Malcolm on turn 2, and I just countered your 3-drop on 3, and now I have 4 power of flying in the air on turn 3. It's just like, fuck me, I'm dead. And then later in the game, it's Flash Windrake, which isn't terrible, but it's not good.
I could come around on that. So what it does is, obviously, it plays less with, like, flash-based blue decks, and then this bounce spell plays better with, tempo-based blue decks, tap-out blue decks and stuff like that. I guess I could get on board with that. The one time I played recently, and I played Coatl, like, every time I countered a spell, like, my opponents got mad at me, so...
Yeah, and I don't think that's necessarily a metric, because, like, Magic players get mad
Yeah, but it's
But we do talk about...
it's one of those oops. Like you know when you like consider like not even doing it because it's such an insane play that it like it's like maybe I should just do something else. Like
we have talked a lot in the last year about polarity, and Hope Ender Coatl is pretty polar. One thing that it does do in the later game, and I feel like people are like loath to play this card when it's not actually going to counter anything, but sometimes on like turn 5 I'll flash it in and it doesn't counter a card, but the tax makes it so like your opponent can't play their second spell, and that's still solid. But at the same time, when you take that line, like you can't actually know if it's having an impact or not. So
yeah, I can take or leave Coatl. I think it's cool that it exists, but it is really feels bad when you get blown out by it.
Especially if you're on the draw, you're just like, fuck me, okay.
Yeah. Teld mentioned the interaction between Unnerve and Grasp and the Prowess creatures, and that's actually pretty good to like play a mana war that triggers Prowess. It's also notable that like this just dumps an extra card in your graveyard for things like Dig Through Time, Abhorrent Oculus. In the color.
This card's cracked out with Snapcaster Mage, actually.
Gearhulk.
It's good. It's good with it's good.
Doesn't work with Gearhulk. It's not.
Well, it might put an instant in the graveyard for Gearhulk.
Yeah.
So yeah, let's do that. Let's cut the Coatl for the grass.
I never thought I would say that, but our players really do not like it when Coatl does the thing on curve. It just just feels like you lose.
I distinctly mentioned that when we reviewed it in Modern Horizons 3.
You did. I was never not gonna insist on this card, but
we knew. I mean, congrats. Chris made one magic card, and it makes people upset.
Hey, I made Stoic Sphinx, and that also made people upset.
What will he do next?
The Skin is like super sick value card. I don't know if we need this in the cube necessarily, but I do like cards that incidentally put cards in the graveyard and also like give you good board or give you good value without being completely anemic.
Under the Skin's good. I guess here's a question: if we had access to Eternal Witness, would we be playing it in the mainline cube? No, of course. I mean, Eternal Witness can do things with like Soul Herd or Time Warp, so like that's something that this card can't do. But like, would we play Eternal Witness? Because if not, I don't know that we necessarily would play this.
That's fair. I think the fact that it loads the graveyard for itself and also can flip big green creatures into play is notable. But I have no idea if we play Eternal Witness at this point, because like, has Magic just super power crept that card out? At this point?
Am pretty certain that we would put Ewit in here so people could play with it. I don't know whether or not it would stick.
That is true. That makes sense.
Yeah, that's fair.
So I like Under the Skin. I like it a little less than the card we just talked about, because it's not really a synergy card in green so much as just like I think it's got raw power, but maybe it's actually like underpowered compared to the other things green is doing, like the things green is doing these days.
It's fantastic.
It's really good, yeah. One thing to note here, I don't know if you guys share the sentiment, and it's kind of like the Oculus where you have to do some sort of work or be in a certain type of deck, but Tribute to the World Tree has felt like amazing.
Oh, it is.
When people play it.
Oh, no. It's a very, very good card.
It's backbreaking. It is so much better than Archie's Charm if you're in mono green. If your opponent plays...
It's an absolute engine.
If your opponent plays it on turn 3, you're just like, oh, fuck. Which, to your point, like, that might make it a card that we should consider cutting.
A discussion point.
But we also don't... I do like having a card that encourages you not to use the power of green fixing necessarily to play like 5 different colors.
I agree 100%. It's just challenging when you include like a super powerful, almost unbeatable on curve enchantment, because like if you're gonna do that, then it feels like you're supposed to increase the amount of things that interact with enchantments. But those cards are duds.
The reason it's like it's also removes the. I think we're actually getting to the point where artifact and enchantment removal is just good. I think there's just every set it feels like we get a bunch of new cards that interact positively with those cards, and I actually think that's probably something WotC is actively doing so that they can put destroy target artifact or enchantment on more cards and it just be like a good card in general. But yeah, I do see your point. But I think we're entering an era of Magic where we're going to see more of this. But yeah, Tribute's been really, really good. We don't have to play Under the Skin. I just wanted to mention it because, again, this is one of those cards that read pretty good and it's played even better, and it's just been a really sick value card. I like it less than Unnerving Grasp for all the reasons Tim just mentioned, where, like, the reason I want Unnerving Grasp in the cube is it's really good in these, like, is it prowess decks where you're trying to really just get ahead, jockey onto the board, and kill your opponent. And I think it works really well in that shell. Whereas I think Under the Skin might be a little underpowered for the kind of deck that you're going to want to play it in, which is like a green grindy shell. Because generally in those, you want your cards to be very high power level.
Okay, so you have 2 more Delirium cards on the list to kind of wrap up the like Duskmourn conversation here. The first is FOMO, Fear of Missing Out. That's the 1 in a red, 2/3. When it ETBs, you must discard a card, and then you draw a card. Notably, if you're empty-handed, if it's the last card out of your hand, it will just draw the card, kind of like Seasoned Pyromancer. And then if you have Delirium, correct me if I'm wrong, I'm not looking at the card, but it lets you, when it attacks, it lets you untap one of your creatures and get an extra combat phase, something along those lines.
Yes.
Baseline, 2 mana, 2/3, that rummages. It's a forced rummage. I have found in Limited that's kind of annoying sometimes, but like, even though it's forced, I think that's just to make you try and get Delirium faster. So it's like kind of making you play correctly, even if you don't want to. Obviously worse than if it just like looted, but sometimes you do play it out in an empty hand. I mean, the baseline's good. I will say that there is a 2-drop Brazen Collector that I've just like been completely down on, but I will also say there's another 2-drop red creature that was just spoiled yesterday coming out in Foundations that is almost certainly going to make the cube. So like there's a little bit of a give and pull about red 2s right now if Fear of Missing Out was something we really cared about trying out.
I don't like extra combat steps, but that wouldn't stop me from being okay with testing this.
Well, why is that? It's not an effect we've really ever like had before, so we never really discussed it.
I don't know. It's just an emotional thing, but also this is not obviously like in a solitary sense my cube. I know that you're down on Collector. When I read the card, I can't see how it could possibly be bad. Being a 2-power first strike creature, like even if you draw late. But I know that you're not into it.
Well, I think a 2-power first strike creature is bad beyond turn 2. Like that is not a good card on turn 3. Like, I know you can back it up with removal, like burn is the thing, but like that's just not a good card on turn 3. You would not play a 3-mana 2-power first striker.
Yeah, I think First Strike is where it really gets good around 3 mana anyways. I think we notice like with Breaches, it always just like attacks at everything.
Dragonkin's good because it can turn into a dragon. Like it's not it partially First Strike on that card does certainly make that better. And Brazen Collector is good on turn 2, but man, if you don't have it on turn 2, it's just like on turn 3, am I really going to play this over like any other card I could play on turn 3 instead? It's like, not really. So I have to have it on turn 2 to be good. It has to have a clean attack.
I have no attachment to Collector. Cunning Coyote is occasionally insane, but I'm not married to that either. And then also Amped Raptor is like fucking insane.
Or really bad sometimes.
Really bad, yeah.
And we've liked Generous Plunderer, right? That card's been pretty good.
Oh, that card's good, yeah.
Okay. So, I mean, I would say
right about this one.
I would say if we want to try FOMO, which I don't have a strong opinion about, I would just cut Brazen Collector, but we are getting this Seer Step, Seer Slicer Goblin.
Yeah, I'd like to try it. I'm not in love with this card, but I did really like Scrapwork Mutt and when we tried it, and I like these sort of rummagey, like hand fixy type cards. These are the kind of cards that I just really enjoy.
I would rather have Mutt than is Fear of Missing Out just better than Mutt? I don't know.
They're comparable. Mutt. I will say one thing about the extra combat is it's not like untap all your creatures and attack with everything. It's only one creature untap. So it's almost like it gives a creature double strike is kind of how it reads, rather than the whole like Aurelia hit you twice with everything type thing.
We can test it.
Yeah, this card's played really well, but part of that is just how easy Delirium is to get, and the fact that
in the limited format, which does dovetail into the what is it called, Omnivorous Flytrap.
Yeah, this card's a total bomb. I don't know if it'll play out that way in our cube, but like in the actual limited format, it's really
This one is like you must have Delirium or it's a nothing card. So that's the 3 mana 2/4. If you have Delirium, when it enters the battlefield or attacks, you distribute 2+1/+1 counters among your creatures, and then if you have Super Delirium with 6 or more card types, you do that and then double the counters on anything you targeted. So like this is a vanilla 2/4 if you don't have Delirium. Which, I don't know, we've said it with both of the Delirium cards, 3 of the Delirium cards we've mentioned here, it's not a given. So I feel like this one is one of those work cards that people just won't latch onto because you have to do something, as opposed to just playing like an ornery Tumblewag or whatever in that slot. I agree, it's a total bomb in Limited, but you can get Delirium on turn 2 in Duskmourn Limited, so...
I'm not crazy about this.
Yeah, that's fine. I just wanted to mention it because it has been very, very high ceiling card, yeah.
Yeah. So I think that one's going to be a pass for me as well, just because of the whole, like, we're not going to get Delirium that often, which does kind of put a close on Duskmourn cards to talk about. And that, my friends, brings us to the end of this Development Diaries episode. If it felt like I was rushing things along there at the end, that's because I absolutely was. You can hear my baby boy crying in the background, so I had to hurry and get him up from a nap. Daddy issues, you know. Anyway, I hope just like with the Modern Horizons 3 cycle that this gave you some insight into our cube design process, whether you're a regular player or a cube designer yourself. You'll notice there's a lot more talking over one another, a bit more candid speech than what we usually put out on the podcast, and more free-flowing progression to the conversation, allowing us to sidebar and get off topic pretty easily. But even with the occasional distraction, the main goal still revolves around a specific goal, namely, in this case, reevaluating the Duskmourn cards that either ended up being a bit too good, as well as ones that we skipped over in our initial run of the set. We really enjoy doing these episodes, partly because it takes less prep and we can just have a normal conversation, but also because we don't get to revisit sets and dive into card specifics and card swaps that often on a normal podcast episode. If you want to hear more of this, let us know. So far, we've been looking for opportunities where we know we're going to have an extended discussion about cube changes, and then we consider whether or not it'd make for good Development Diaries content. But if it's something you all like to listen to, we're happy to do more. Well, let's go ahead and close this bad boy out, though. Remember that you can find our Discord server wherever you're listening to this podcast. Find us on Twitter at JankDiverGamin or YouTube.com/JankDiverGamin. And do me a huge favor and like this video or subscribe if you're listening on YouTube. That would mean a lot to me, so thank you. You can also find Teld streaming on twitch.tv/TeldTalks. That's TELD Talks. We'll be back with our MTG Foundation set reviews in the next set of episodes, followed by a fairly extensive rant about the 2025 standard lineup that's been announced a few weeks after that. That episode's already been recorded, and let's just say things got a little bit heated, but Foundations first, set reviews first. All right, thanks as always for listening. I appreciate all of you out there who made it this far, and we'll catch you next time. Okay, well, it doesn't make much sense to do an extensive farewell when I'm talking to myself, so let me just take a moment to remind all of our American audience to go out and vote if you're able to. I might be too late getting that message out there by the time this releases, but it's important that you take the time to do this with everything that's going on around us. I'm normally not very preachy about this sort of thing, and I'm definitely not getting into my specific political views right now, but I encourage everyone to use their vote to have a say in this election cycle. I'm personally more invested in this election than I've ever been in any previous one, so I urge people to go out and make their voice heard. All right, you get the point. Go out and vote, people, and I hope for the best with this election.